Over the past several days, the patch has finally gotten a chance to simmer and stew around and get rid of all the bad impurities of the outliers, and now that that's the case, we can give you guys the best champions to play right now on this patch. Make sure you smash that like button, destroy the sub button, and as always, let's jump right in. Starting off, of course, with the mid lane, our first champion that we're going to be talking about is NOCTURNE. NOCTURNE mid, despite being nerfed, is actually doing really well right now, and he's beating out all other kinds of champions. It just seems like he's too good of a pick into mid laners, even without the magic resistant health regen that he had in the past. For runes on NOCTURNE, you want to take Lethal Tempo, Presence of Mind, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ultimate Hunter with double adaptive and the armor. Of course, if you're up against somebody who only really does magic damage, then take MR instead of the armor in your minor runes. Lethal Tempo is a very important rune on NOCTURNE. When you get into a fight, and you inevitably will, as most people are going to be engaging on you before you hit level 6, you can then use your fear and your spell shield to buy yourself time and then get that lethal tempo attack speed to go off, use your Q, and absolutely demolish anybody who tries to trade with you. As far as early items go, make sure you pick up an early Tiamat. You see, NOCTURNE isn't a champion who wants to sit in lane and then fight his opponent one-on-one. The problem is that he doesn't really have range, and he doesn't really have a gap closer, so you can't do that. Buy an early Tiamat so that you can shove the wave out and don't have to deal with your opponent for as long. You want to get level 6, and then you can make the big boy moves to really decide the game. After that early Tiamat, pick up your Black Cleaver and then get Berserker Greaves. The attack speed is really nice, and honestly with the spell shield, you shouldn't need much else on NOCTURNE. You don't need Merc Treads, and Tabbies would be nice sometimes, but most of the time, they're not the correct option. Once you get those out of the way, Duskblade is going to be your best option. NOCTURNE's ulti has a natural synergy with Duskblade, and if you manage to surprise somebody from a bush, you could get it off twice, and at that point, it's pretty hard to survive that. After that, grab an Edge of Night for the spell shield so that you could save your W for when it really matters. After that, Guardian Angel and Titanic Hydra can round out your build. NOCTURNE isn't the only AD champion who's really giving his opponents nightmares in the mid lane right now, because PYKE is also doing very well right now. For runes on PYKE, you're going to want to take Hail of Blades. This rune lets PYKE really take over mid lane because his traits become very powerful. If you manage to close the gap with your opponent, and you usually will be able to through either some combination of your W, E, or they're just a melee champion and they don't really have a choice, you can easily outtrade them with all of your hard-hitting auto attacks and the damage from your Q. And you back up these traits even further by taking Cheap Shot, and snowball even harder with Eyeball Collection and Ultimate Hunter. Second Wind and Revitalize will make it so that you can out-sustain your opponents anytime you take damage, and you're never really in trouble in your lane. Since PYKE is an offensive assassin champion, he just takes double adaptive in his runes for damage and armor or magic resist depending on who he's laning against. But no matter who you're laning against, you always want to buy early Tiamat. You might be noticing a bit of a pattern here. You see, PYKE works really similar to NOCTURNE. You don't really want to lane against anybody who outranges you, and even if they don't, you probably want to go elsewhere, maybe like bot lane where there's 2 kills you can get rather than just the 1 in mid lane. I mean, let's be real here, I don't think there's much worse than being a bot lane player and then all of a sudden you see the little shark trail underneath you because a PYKE's nearby, and your mid laner gets spam pinged because you get put 6 feet under by a PYKE ultimate and he snowballs and wins the game for his team. Definitely not a scenario that I have lived out 300 times over. When you are snowballing the game like that, you want to make sure that you pick up your Moby Boots so your roams are even more impressive. After that, Duskblade is really good for you, as the extra damage when you're sneaking up on people with your W or even just ambushing them in a bush will be so tantamount to killing them. After that, Yumu's and Edge of Night are more lethality items that give you mobility and a spell shield respectively, and Guardian Angel and Ravenous Hydra can round out your build with defense and sustain. The last champion we're highlighting for the mid lane has been one who has made it to each of these videos for quite some time now. Diana is still a very strong champion and hasn't been touched at all. She's been very consistent, and Riot hasn't touched her at all in any of the patches since she's been reworked. But now things have settled though, so let's just run you through the runes and items to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing in the best way possible. For runes, you want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter with double adaptive and magic resist or armor if you're fighting an AD mid laner. As far as items go, things have settled down there too. Rod of Ages is the go-to first item, followed up by Sorks and Nashers with Zanya, Rabadon, and Void. No more Proto Belt, and it's fine to have not full CDR. She functions really well with these items as you get health and mana, and always get health and mana as fights go on, thanks to the Eternity passive from Catalyst and Rod of the Ages. Diana can survive without the Nashor's attack speed as a first item thanks to her passive. If you use it correctly, it's enough for a long period of time. As we transition out of the chaotic mid lane and up towards the peaceful farm fest that is top lane, we we have a very strange pick that I honestly can't believe is doing as well as he is. Volibear top lane is actually performing stupidly well. I had to check things 3 times just to make sure that I wasn't hallucinating. But Volibear top lane, which has the 8th highest win rate in the game, is building Press the Attack, Triumph, Tenacity, Last Stand, Demolish, Second Wind with attack speed and double armor. And then for items, you're going Titanic with Tabbies or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and Deadman's, Wit's End, Righteous Glory, Spirit Visage. Honestly, none of this sounds really crazy, except for the fact that he's taking Press the Attack. You know, minor runes seem totally fine, absolutely, sure, bud, take whatever you want. Titanic first, yeah, it's fine, it's offensive, whatever, nobody really has a big deal. Deadman's, sure, Wit's End, yeah, he attacks a lot, absolutely, whatever, man. Righteous Glory, engage, yeah, gotcha, you're fine, bud, 100%. But is PTA really that ridiculous? Breaking it down, Volibear has to auto attack 3 times before he can use his W, and his W is his main form of burst. So at the end of the day, it's really not a bad rune, and it's up to you to utilize it properly. You won't have Aftershock to really give you a bunch of resists, so you can't just run in and sprint at the enemy team and expect to survive every time until you get a lot of items. You have to play a little bit more carefully, but you trade that carefulness for absolute early game dominance. And when you can smash people that much harder in the early stages of the game, you snowball even faster and you become impossible to handle. You'll be eating people faster than I eat all the pickles out of the fridge at 3 AM. Speaking of which, it's actually almost that time, so let's hurry up and move on to the next top lane champion, which is KLED. I really feel like a lot of people are disrespecting this man because he's doing really well and has been doing really well for a lot of patches now. Consistently high win rates with a decent pick rate too. And all of his items are very strong right now. The runes on KLED really haven't changed in a long time though. You want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Demolish, and Second Wind with double adaptive and armor. KLED doesn't need attack speed even though he's an auto attack reliant champion thanks to the fact that his W gives him so much. Beyond that, for items, always pick up an early Tiamat. It's really nice for wave clear and your trades as KLED. After you grab that, make sure you pick up a Black Cleaver. Being able to shred armor and the cooldown reduction and the movement speed are all really important for him. Keeping up with your opponents and being able to slap their heads in with your spear is really important. Then pick up those Tabbies or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, as they always should be, and grab Titanic as your upgrade to your Tiamat. From there, Blade of the Ruined King is the new 3rd item. This is really good for KLED in a multitude of ways. You could use the Blade of the Ruined King active to close the distance between you and your enemy, and once you're there, if they don't flash or use some sort of mobility, then you just get a Q for free, or can hit them until they move. At that point, you can feel free to use your E to catch back up to them. This basically makes it impossible to escape KLED, and KLED never has to use his ultimate. And then you can round everything out with 2 items that make you basically unkillable unless it's a straight on 5v1 melt fight. Death Stance and Steric's Gauge will make it virtually impossible to burst you down, and your sustain is going to be absolutely crazy. Last champion for top lane is going to be one that we've actually highlighted a couple times recently in both new Korean builds that have cropped up and just our tier lists. MAOKAI is proving to be a very solid pick, and it doesn't look like he's going anywhere anytime soon. For runes on MAOKAI, because he's a champion that's really hard to kill already, you don't actually need Aftershock, and most of the time you're gonna want to take Grasp. From there, take Demolish, Conditioning, Overgrowth, Mana Flow, and Transcendence with double adaptive and armor rune, or the MR rune if you're up against somebody who does magic damage. Another reason not to take Aftershock is that when you're in lane, if you Q your opponent and that triggers your Aftershock, you just bounce them away from you. Like, you actually literally just punched them in the face and said go away, but your rune wants you to go in. Really sending a lot of mixed signals there, you know? But for items on MAOKAI, make sure you pick up a Sunfire's or an Abyssal Mask as your first item, and then the other one after that, depending on what you're laning against. And of course, Tabbies or Merc Treads depending on the enemy team as well. From there, you could pick up a Righteous Glory to make your engage really amazing. MAOKAI with a Righteous Glory and potentially his ultimate following behind him is really spooky for an entire team. Then from there, Thornmail makes you an absolute nuisance against auto attack based champions, and Spirit Visage at the very end will make you almost impossible to kill thanks to your incredible healing unless the enemy team has an Executioner's Calling or a Morellonomicon. In that case, probably pick up an Adaptive Helm instead, as you're really not benefiting from any of the effects that the Spirit Visage will give you. That kind of concern is something that you really need to pay attention to if you want to make sure that you're itemizing correctly. You can't just build the same thing every game and expect it to work. These are just general guidelines, and you want to be able to iterate on things and make changes depending on what you're fighting against. Whatever you do, just make sure you're not building the same thing every game in the exact same order. You want to make sure that it's the right choice, and if you're having trouble deciding whether or not something is right, make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have videos and guides on exactly this sort of thing. thing. Something like itemization or other generic wide-range game skills are really important, and we have guides on those. Or who knows, maybe you're looking to pick up one of the champions that we went over in this video. Well, if that's the case, then we have champion guides too, and you should definitely go check them out. Everything that we have is made by challenger level players, and we're always working with our content creators to make more and better content for you guys so that we can give you the best edge to win your games and improve. But now that you've visited and you're ready to keep improving, let's jump into the best segment, the Bush Boys. The #1 jungler on the block is still Wukong. However, since last week, things have changed on him. You do still want to take Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Sudden Impact, and Relentless Hunter with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. However, items. This is where things have gotten different. In a previous video, we had mentioned that a lot of players were going Cinderhulk on Wukong because he needed a chance to scale with levels, and the burst from the AD from Warriors just wasn't enough to justify all the risk that Wukong had to take. But right now, it seems like a lot of players are finding success with the more offensively based Wukong builds, and despite them also buying a Trinity Force, it seems like it doesn't matter and they're able to afford the incredibly expensive item almost every single game. You want to make sure that you grab your Warriors and then tab your Merc Treads depending on the enemy team and pick up that Triforce that I mentioned. After that, Death Stance is an amazing item for all bruisers, not even just Wukong, but the amount of sustain and survivability that it gives you is insane. After that, Guardian Angel and Ravenous Hydra can round out your build, as you really don't want something like Sterix when you have built literally 0 health other than the small amount of health from Triforce, so don't go around making that sort of mistake. Aside from Wukong definitely being the #1 though, NUNU is also smashing the competition with snowballs left and right. He's only a tad bit behind Wukong in terms of performance, and honestly, I just want to know what the heck NUNU packs his snowballs with, cause those things explode with the force of 1,000 suns, man. For runes on NUNU, you want to take Aftershock. He has like 4 different types of CC in his kit. After that, Font of Life, Conditioning, Revitalize, Celerity, and Water Walking are your best friends. Attack speed, adaptive, and armor in the minor runes will help your clear and are standard to pretty much any jungler. It's important to note that Font of Life is something that NUNU players seem really back and forth about. You want to make sure that you're hitting your CC properly in fights, but you also don't want to make sure that you're diving so hard and trying to get that CC off that you end up dying because you just go too deep and end up killing yourself. Never overextend too far into a fight and just allow your slows and your Font of Life to keep you and your team healthy. As far as items on NUNU, Cinderhulk is of course the choice here. He's just a pure tank. After that, tab your Merc Treads depending on the enemy team, and then a Spirit Visage to make your healing absolutely insane. From there, Stoneplate is a very powerful item that makes you pretty much impossible to kill until the enemy really hits the late game. And then a Warmogs will make it so that you have insane regen once you get out of the fights that you do inevitably survive, and a Knight's Vow gives your teammate that you decide is the lucky winner another health bar to work with. And the last jungler that we are going to highlight is going to be Warwick. He's always been a staple in the jungle, especially ever since he's been reworked. He has a really good sustain, his early game is very strong, and has a solid place in a lot of teams. For runes on Warwick, make sure you take Press the Attack, as it synergizes really well with everything that he does, including his ultimate. After that, Triumph, Alacrity, Last Stand, Celerity, and Water Walking are your friends. Celerity is a rune that you really don't see taken very often, but Warwick gets a really large amount of movement speed from his W. Celerity will amplify that a ton and make it even stronger. Moving on to the items that you want to take on Warwick, usually you used to go either Warriors or Cinderhulk and you would go a full offensive or a full defensive build on him, but now there's a little bit of a different thing going on. You still want to make sure you grab an early Tiamat, as Warwick is reliant on it to clear the AoE camps, Raptors and Krugs being 2 of the most common. After that, make sure you get your Cinderhulk to really give you health and buy you time to do damage that you already have. Tabbies and Merc Treads depending on the enemy team will also further your survivability, and then grab a Titanic Hydra as the upgrade to your Tiamat. This gives you an extra auto attack in your burst, and it makes it so that you can get people under half health faster and activate your W attack speed way sooner. Now, if you are richer than anybody else in the universe, buy a Triforce after that. But if you're not, then just settle for a Dead Man's. You're not going to be able to get it if you aren't seriously fed and can just murder the enemy team over and over. Wrap up your build with a Spirit Visage and then a Thornmail. This will give you MR and armor to go up against any threat that you have on the enemy team, and it'll also amplify your healing and cut the enemies in half. Now that we've wrapped up the Bush Boys and gone over the 3 frontrunners, let's move on to the bottom lane, and our #1 highlight here is YASUO. YASUO has been performing insanely well on the patch after all of the other strong AD carries have gotten nerfs in some way. You want to make sure that you grab Conqueror, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Taste of Blood, and Ravenous Hunter with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. For items on him, Phantom Dancer as a first item is really important. Attack speed is really good for Yasuo as it affects the cooldown of his Q. Berserker Greaves are also really good for that same reason, and movement speed is important on Yasuo because it helps his flow passive. After that, Infinity Edge is just standard. Yasuo is going to crit a ton and basically every hit once you're at that point, so the extra amplified crit damage is really awesome. Frozen Mallet after that will give you even more survivability than you could before and gives you a really really annoying slow that makes it so that even people who have mobility will have a tough time getting away from you. Guardian Angel and Wit's End wrap up the build and make you a really hard threat to kill. The second AD carry that we're going to be highlighting is JHIN, and JHIN has kind of snuck up on things here, but he's coming back with a Storm Razor rush. But first, runes, Fleet Footwork, Triumph, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Gathering Storm with double adaptive and armor. As you can see, JHIN doesn't really benefit from the attack speed as much as he would from other stats. That's why you're taking Bloodline and double adaptive rather than the alacrity or attack speed runes. For items though, like I said, Storm Razor rush is the way right now. The slow is actually really powerful and almost guarantees JHIN's W. After that, pick up your Swifties just to make sure that you have a ton of mobility, and then Infinity Edge to make your crits hit really hard. Rapid Fire Cannon gives you bonus range and makes your Storm Razor hit even that much more powerful, and then after that, Static Shiv adds on to the party with a GA to wrap everything up to make you a bit harder to kill. Just be careful, as JHIN is weak to champions who can dive. He doesn't have any mobility, and he usually lacks the damage to really outpace people who dive on top of him. The last AD carry we're going to highlight is one of the AD carries who still remains at the top. Miss Fortune hasn't quite fallen far enough to call her not one of the best champions on the patch. For Miss Fortune, as always, you want to take Press the Attack, Overheal, Bloodline, Coup de Grace, Nimbus Cloak, and Gathering Storm with attack speed, adaptive, and armor in your minor runes. Nothing really has changed here. You want to take Essence Reaver and Infinity Edge first before finishing your boots, as your W movement speed makes up for the difference. Once you get your Berserkers though, after that get a Bloodthirster and then a GA and Mortal Reminder to round everything out. Miss Fortune is still an amazing teamfighter with her ultimate, has really annoying slows, a good early game, and her mid-game Qs can crit people for over half their health. She's a powerful champion and hasn't been nerfed enough to take her out of the game yet. And now that we've covered AD carries, the only thing left to do is go over supports, and the first support we're going to be highlighting is NAMI. NAMI's been performing really well for a couple patches now, and she really just outshines everybody else right now. Honestly, it makes sense. She brings a lot to the table. She has 2 CCs, well actually 3 if you count the slow. She has healing, she has extra damage she can buff her allies with. What's not to like there? For runes on NAMI, you want to take Airy, Mana Flow, Transcendence, and Scorch, and then the mix up here is that Biscuits and Cosmic Insight are outperforming Resolve Secondary, which is an understandable change. Tanks and engaging supports are not as popular and are not performing as well anymore, so since she doesn't have to worry about the early game that much, she doesn't need to worry about that anymore. Of course, for minor runes, make sure you take double adaptive and armor. For your items, you're definitely going to want to take Spell Thieves. NAMI has good poke in lane, and she'll be able to proc it often thanks to her not so long cooldowns. After that, Moby Boots is standard for basically every support, but Athene's, Ardent, Redemption, and Shirelia's are going to be your core items. This gives you a lot of mobility with the Shirelia's active and a lot of healing, and of course if you're doing damage constantly, which NAMI normally is thanks to how all of her abilities are either AoE or buff her allies, you get extra healing for free thanks to the Athenes. Nothing too special going on there, but she's just really solid and really strong. The second support we're going to highlight is TARIC. TARIC is normally known as a champion who's played in like boosting duos with a Master E or something like that, but he's also very solid in the bot lane too. For runes on him, you're going to want to take Guardian, Font of Life, Bone Plating, Revitalize, Presence of Mind, and Tenacity with attack speed and double armor. Now, Presence of Mind might seem weird and Precision Secondary might just seem weird in general, but TARIC goes through mana faster than basically anybody else in the game. His Q is almost never on cooldown if you're using his passive properly. And you definitely want to be using his passive properly. It gives you so much more healing and makes your W and E cooldown lower all the time. More healing, stunning, and shielding is really important. For items on TARIC, make sure you grab a Relic Shield. Just really nice for him in the early game, and then Moby Boots if you want to be roaming, but if not, Tabby or Merc Treads are really good, as TARIC wants to be defensive and survive until his ultimate gets off. Maybe Tenacity is the right play if the enemy team has a lot of CC, so that you can get your abilities off. After that, Zeke's is really powerful on him, as is Knight's Vow. After that, Redemption will give you good healing and make you have a really nice burst of healing in long fights, as well as Ardent, because you're going to have so much AoE healing and shielding that you can empower yourself and your allies constantly. And the very last champion that we're going to highlight is going to be MAOKAI. Yes, MAOKAI support is still a thing, and he's still doing really good across all ranks. I don't know why more people aren't playing him, because he just seems to be very strong right now. Even if you aren't playing him support, I mean at least play him top lane. For runes on MAOKAI, make sure you take Aftershock, Font of Life, Conditioning, Overgrowth, Biscuits, and Cosmic Insight with CDR and double armor in your minor runes. This gives you really nice scaling and gives you the ability to engage reliably on the enemy team. You're not playing Grass MAOKAI top, and you want that Aftershock to to give the extra security whenever you go in. For items on MAOKAI, make sure you grab a relic shield much like TARIC. You're an early game tank and you want to be able to share that CS with your team. Then Moby Boots if you're trying to roam, and again, Tabby and Merc Treads are viable here. You don't always have to buy Moby Boots if you're playing support, but it is strong if you're all over the map. Follow that up with a Zeke's much like TARIC and a Knight's Vow just like TARC, but after that you want a Stone Plate as you don't really have any reason to buy healing power. You have to just get tanky for yourself, but you can get a Locket last item to give your allies a burst of shielding, especially if you use your Stone Plate beforehand. The health scaling from Locket will be affected by the Stone Plate health, so make sure you do that if you can every time you get it off. It'll just make the shield that much bigger and can be the difference between winning or losing a fight. And with MAOKAI, that is the last champion we're highlighting, and that means that we are finally wrapped up for the best champions on patch 10.7. Looking to learn some of the champions that we went over in this video? Well then make sure you go check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have tons of guides and all of them are by challenger level players, and we always work with our content creators to make more and better content for you guys so you can get the best edge and win your games. Whether you're looking for micro guides, champion specific guides, macro guides, or anything in between, we have it up there for you. If you made it this far, thanks for watching the whole video. Do you guys think we missed anybody? Point them out in the comments for us. But as always, my name is Ace Windstorm, and I will see you all later.